So with calf strain, you look at the mechanism of how they do it. Now these can vary massively, whereas I think a lot of other injuries are very clear. You know, ACL is very clear, ankle sprain is very clear, hamstrings, groins, very clear what they've done. Whereas with the calf muscle, they can do it quite a different ways. Jumping, just jogging, just someone going out to the warm up can do a calf strain quite easily. So I think it's a lot harder with the mechanism in terms of picking up with what injury they've done. When they come in from, if someone has injured a calf, the first thing always going to do is doing your price. So you're going to do your protection, your RICE, and so your rest, ice, compression, elevation. So they're going to come in straight away. They're going to go on to either using ice in a compression bandage, or you're going to use a machine that's going to be able to do both for you, which is what we've got. So you're going to do that straight away. And again, I would do that before I've actually assessed the injury. Because if they're going to stop playing, or whatever sport they're playing, they've stopped. So it doesn't matter. You might as well get it in early, as quick as you can, and then worry about it. And then it's a case of once they've had that initial 20 minutes, then assessing. And there's big differences between injuring the two main calf muscles. You know, if you do soleus or gastroc, they present in very different ways. If you do the lower end in terms of the soleus muscle, it tends to be a bit more of a kind of an ache. When they're walking around, and no real kind of sharp pain to it, but just a bit of a dull ache in the lower end of the calf. Whereas with gastroc, they can generally pinpoint it and say that's where I've my injury. So straight away, what you've got to do is get them once you've had that first stage of ice, compressing them again, and you've got to do a bit of protection, because every time you walk, you're going to use your calf, and you're going to use it a lot. So you will find, I think, for quite a few days, they will be sore walking around. And this tends to be, again, different to the hamstring, the groins, quad muscles, any of those. I think what tends to happen with the calf strain, they tend to struggle for quite a few days when it comes to walking. And that's the first stage you've got to hit, for me, is can you walk pain-free? And that can take a week, that can take 10 days. And I don't really start doing anything of any load until after that. Reason being, they're loading it walking. And you're not going to stop someone from walking around. So every time they take a step, they are loading that calf muscle. So for me, it doesn't seem any point in me doing that as well. So I would never really do a great deal for those first sort of 7 to 10 days until at least I've got someone my pain-free walking. So that initial stage is doing it every hour, 20 minutes every hour, doing the ice and doing the compression. Doing it over in the evenings as much as you can possibly do it, and then eventually after a couple of days we would then think about doing hot and cold to flush out that muscle, and then using electrotherapy, so using ultrasound, using laser, using pulse shortwave, and that's really it, with a little bit of light effleurage massage. I don't want to go deep into it. I've got no interest in breaking up that very immature scar. I want to try and just keep it, get it laid down first before I start to work into it. So that's my first 7-10 days. And I think with calves, they can be quite troublesome if you push them. Probably more than most other muscles, I think. Because they are the connection when you're walking around, I think you have to get that walking phase right. And you'll probably even find, even when they can walk, they struggle to run for a few days after that as well, for a few weeks potentially, sorry, after that. Because I think it's as I say, I think that's where the big difference is. I think with the connection of every step you take, you are using your soleus or using your gastroc muscle. So I think you have to take that into consideration when you're rehabbing a calf strain.